All
So
right.
introduce yourself. I'm Brett.
Brett, I'm Mike Davis.
Nice to
I'm
meet you.
the owner and operator of the Elevant brand.
There you go.
Yeah.
Tell us what mental health means to you.
So, mental health to me, it's really important because I feel as though there's a lot of people in this day and age of like social media and social pressures that really it affects a lot of people. And as an athlete like yourself,
Right.
it's something that is highly recognizable. And as I coach in a college atmosphere at this time, it's something that we put a heavy focus on,
Right.
and something that I've really tried to really help those guys really try and overcome the challenges of moving to a new environment, acclimating to a new life,
Making those
essentially.
adjustments.
Yeah, and
Yep.
it's as someone that struggled with mental health and substance abuse. It's
Yep.
something that I feel is really important to continue to pass it on. That's why I
Yeah,
love I love what you're doing
it's
with
real.
this too.
Yeah. So I mean, for me, I was D1 golfer,
Yeah.
and after I got hurt, that led to my first rehab, coming off opiates and other you know narcotics and stuff. And unfortunately, that's one of the biggest issues that we're handling. But the good thing is we're going to create a peer-to-peer system,
Yeah.
so that we can lead that push to bring those resources. So I appreciate what you're doing,
Yeah.
and hopefully we can put something together for your team.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
know,
I love what you're doing. I think it's something that is, it's been so quiet for so long, and now that it's really putting a focus on it and bringing it into the light, I think this is an opportunity to help a
yes,
lot of people. So,
yep.
I was
So,
inspired when I heard your story on
so
this as
I
well.
tell people, I said, I was supposed to be another quiet ending. I was
Yeah.
supposed to be another stat, but I built something loud enough to break the silence.
Yeah. Well, I hope that helps others do the
Yeah,
same, because I think you can
absolutely.
help a lot of people. And, again, by being a inspiration behind this and telling your story, I think
Yep.
is what's really important because,
That's what I'm
again,
getting better at.
yeah,
It
well,
took a
that's
while.
hard.
It took me
That's
10 years
hard.
to tell my
Yeah.
story.
Well, it takes a lot of
It
vulnerability to do
does,
that. And, when you open yourself up in that way, I think it inspires others to do that
for
as well.
sure.
So I'm really excited for you.
Awesome.
And I think it's great you having us out
Awesome.
here.
Thanks.
Nice to meet you.
Cool,
Yeah.
cool.
Here. But without further ado, I'm really excited to have our next guest in here. Brett, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, Mike. My name is Brett Emmers. I am founder, CEO of a new nonprofit, Plus3 Golf. We're based out of Nashville, Tennessee, and we are on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and we are currently developing our YouTube platform. You can find all of our stuff at Plus3 Golf, the number 3.
There it is. I love it. Yeah, we had an opportunity to meet at the Joe Diffie Classic a couple weeks ago. As you probably know, so Travis Humes is Joe Diffie's son, and he was my roommate in college. So as it was really cool to have an opportunity to go back to Nashville and see my former teammates. Some of them I hadn't seen since I had graduated college, and that sounds pretty lame because that was like almost 15 years ago. But it's always so special to be able to reconnect with folks, and it's obviously a very special event for celebrating the life of Joe Diffie. And I think there was a great opportunity to highlight up and coming musicians, athletes, and overall the event was so fun, and it gave me an opportunity to meet with you. Can you share how did you get involved with that event, and
Mhm.
what does Plus3 Golf like? What are you guys all about?
So I'll start with the Joe Diffie. So Joe Diffie's son, his other son is Parker Diffie. I met Parker when I did the Keith Whitley tournament last year with Keith Whitley's son. So Parker was on one of the teams that Plus3 Golf put together, and pretty much from there we just kind of developed a friendship. And when he started realizing that I was interested in working with high school student athletes, he got real interested because his son had played college football.
Sure.
And so which I think his son had some level of issues through that. So me and him just kind of hit it off on that level. And then he's been a big inspiration for telling my story and, coming out on all that. But through that friendship, we started chit chatting because I've done like 6, 7 tournaments here in Nashville, nonprofit stuff. been able to raise roughly 30,000 for veterans here in Nashville. Been partnered with the VFW Department of Tennessee, as well as their Southern Conference. So that partnership was, and I'll get into how all this kind of got started. But the Joe Diffie Classic, and I'm glad that you said that you got to see people that you haven't seen, right? So the platform of our tournaments is being able to bring people together, the community resources, and then end of our goal is to be able to fundraise directly for those athletes, for those musicians, and the goal is to basically be the most transparent nonprofit to where when you come to our events, the people that are there are the ones you're actually fundraising for, on top of our curriculum and things that I'll get into. But Plus3 Golf as a whole, so that's kind of the premise of some of the tournaments that we're going to be putting on. But Plus3 Golf is a nonprofit that's going to be providing mental health resources, training, development for athletes, entertainment industry, veterans, as well as community leaders. So one of the biggest issues right now in mental health, and even CDC, National Institute of Health, will even kind of mention it, the coaches don't have the support and the leadership doesn't have the support. So why would the people that follow them be more associated with mental health? So Plus3 Golf is taking that kind of concept and saying we're going to create a certification for leadership, to make them certified advocates so that they're able to recognize, respond, and endorse crisis. That way we can start creating preemptive solutions to suicide and substance abuse and things like that. So Plus3 Golf will be launching basically a nonprofit arm, a mental health arm called Quiet Line. And we'll be launching that in the next couple of weeks. So that'll be a curriculum that we actually bring into high school level, and then junior development to help integrating trauma support into everyday conversation.
No, that totally makes sense. And out of curiosity, when you say that these folks don't have the support, what do you mean by that? Kind of dive deeper
Well, I've had some conversation. I'm not going to go into specifics on who, but I've talked to a D1 college, and I asked him. This was last year, and I asked him. I said, "Well, you guys have all these resources." I said, "What's the issues? What's happening?" And they all say, "Well, we have them. We have them. We have them." So any person you talk to is like, "Yeah, we know where they are," and yet between 11 and 35, the second leading cause of death is suicide. Something's wrong, right? You can't sit here and say that we have all these resources and all this, when the second leading cause of death is suicide. And I'm pretty sure I read too, the first leading cause has substance abuse and like substance overdose. So that's suicide. Most of that is suicide. So really, when you start diving into it, it clearly there's a break in communication. Why aren't people going to get help if we have it? And that's stigma. The stigma, that's training. That's how we're raised. That's how we're developed. We're not trained to go seek help for mental health. That's just not what we're doing. That's not what happens, especially growing up in the 90s. Right? There's no talk about addiction. There's no talk. The MLB had jars of pills in their locker rooms. There's a lot of misconceptions still in the athlete world. And instead of trying to go to the masses, I'm going to start with leadership. So it to me, it makes more sense for me to empower a coach to be able to endorse crisis. That way he can actively be the one in the room supporting the person that's hurting. It's trying to figure out if the person's hurting, struggling, going through drugs, suicide ideation. It's saying, because so I'll get into, I'm kind of going down that, but so I'm a suicide survivor. Okay. So in 2014, I survived a suicide attempt and then when I went to college, in 2006, 2007, I had a bunch of injuries that sidelined my career. Had a red shirt my freshman year, and it just led down a very bad substance abuse. It opened up my major depression I didn't know I had. It opened up anxiety problems I didn't know I had. Um, but I never wanted to go get help. I didn't know I needed help. I didn't know I was doing something so wrong, until I'm in a hospital bed and I can't sign my own name. That's the issue. It's not about, you know, these young kids don't necessarily know what's going on around them until they're, either away from it or in a bad situation. We kind of just develop as the, time goes. Well, that's the problem, because guess what? Now, mental health is, if someone decides they want to kill themselves, they're not going to necessarily tell you for 3 months straight that they want to do it. It's not how this works. That's not the practicalities of addressing those mental health stats. And in order to truly get in front of them, is to just integrate it into the development, right? We create curriculums that directly involve trauma support and trauma techniques, um, and we disguise that, right? We disguise trauma support within development and wellness to make sure that these kids, the next generation, if because again, if they don't want to talk about it all the way up till that day, right? How do you get in front of that if you don't know?
It's a
Well,
tough question, and it's
it
yeah,
is, but
it's so
that's the
amazing.
problem.
Yeah. When I first met you too, I was blown away by just how frontal you are about the struggles and the suicide attempt that you went through, because I feel like that's something that, again, you're giving a voice to something that is a very personal story, but also I think that's where we jump into how do we help others and how do we prevent these things from happening. And this is where I kind of want to go back to. Can you share with us like a little bit more about when you started developing mental health troubles? Like, when did you start recognizing it, and kind of like what led up to kind of like hitting rock bottom, as you told
Yeah, there's a couple moments. So I kind of jumped into that story just out of
me?
nowhere, but
I love it.
um, it's all very real. It is. It's very personal for me, Mike. This is, I have family issues with suicide. I have an uncle, so like this is deep rooted stuff for me. And then for me to personally have to go through it and not expect it, there's just a lot of dangers there. But in 2006, when I got a scholarship to East Carolina, and um, after my first injury, I ended up with a lot of extra time, so I had a sprained ACL, um, ended up picking up guitar and playing a lot of music. But through that, it led to my first rehab because of the drugs. So again, I was the most straight edge high school student. People wouldn't believe me if I told them I was doing drugs, because in high school I wasn't going out and drinking. I might smoke here and there, but I was not. At spring break, I was at golf tournaments. In the summer, I was training with my golf coach, my personal swing coach. Like, I was a straight edge kid. And then all of a sudden, boom, I get injured and now I'm in rehab, right? And so that was the first moment where I realized something's different. Um, but I didn't know I had a problem at that point, because that first time, I mean, I was 18, 19 years old in rehab, and I didn't know even really what addiction was up until that point. That wasn't a conversational piece for me. And that was when I first got open to counseling and therapists and storytelling, right? And then after that rehab session, I got back onto the golf team and ended up spraining my ACL again, which is the one that ended my career. So that one brought me down to the rock bottom. So that was 2009 ish, 2008. And 2014 is when I tried to infiltrate my system with large quantities of drugs. And um, that's it's one of those. Yeah, sorry, I'm getting a little. I'm trying not to. It's not an easy conversation because Um, Again, these are things that you don't really realize, or you know, here, bring me back a little bit. What's so in 2014, let's just say over the 5 years of being out of college and being out of that situation, um, I had several scenarios that were tough. Um, I think I've had a couple overdoses, undiagnosed, unrecognized ones. But in 14, it took its head, and um, although it's very difficult to talk about, it's very. I didn't think I'd get choked up. Honestly, I wasn't choked up 5 minutes because this is how it comes on hard, Um, but it's unfortunate that I've learned that I'm not the only one that deals with this. I'm not the only athlete that has lost their identity through athletics or lost their hope through athletics. You know, there's so much good that athletics can do for kids and do for junior athletes. And when you look at my story, um, I was talented. I'm still a talented athlete. I'm still a talented golfer. I can still do a lot of those things. But when the athletic world shuts you down and now you have nothing, um, it's a very painful thing, and it's replicated in different industries, right? But in 2014, so I'm gonna go back. So now I'm kind of out of it. But 2014, when I did end up trying to take my life, I ended up going to a 6-month rehabilitation program. I recognized at that point, after doing that, and not really, there was a lot of comfort in that decision. I hate saying it like that. There's a lot of very dark comfort in that. But when I came out of it and realized I wasn't dead, and realized that it didn't go through, um, and ended up having a police officer involuntarily take me to the hospital, those are moments that I can't let go, right? Those are moments I really want to be able to, but, it's they're very real and they're traumatic, right? Those are trauma pieces that I have to, constantly work through every day, trying to navigate the space of going there,
Hmm.
you know?
So
But
that's so powerful, and I thank you so much for being brave enough to share your story here. And what I think about too is, like, after you've hit rock bottom, let's start talking about your road to recovery. You mentioned
yeah.
that you started in a rehabilitation center, but like, what was like
Mhm.
the first step that really started putting you in the right direction?
When I realized, it's so corny and it's so cliche, but there's two things. One, I truly recognized that I was the problem. It was nobody else. I am, and there was no, like, yeah, there's scenarios that happen that might influence it or cause it or this or that. But end of the day, when I was able to really say, you know, it's time to look at what's happening inside personally, self-evaluation, self-inventory, all types of AA and A dialogue. But end of the day, it's just trying to figure out who I am again. That identity loss is crucial. It's detrimental to people. Um, and that's why there's we're going to create pathways for athletes like that, right? It doesn't that between that and the common saying of put the bat down, stop fighting it, stop fighting that you have to go do this or have to do that, just stop and be present. And in that Christian program, I was able to learn how to work within seconds, work within minutes, work within very small amounts of time, to learn how to reintegrate myself into normal life. Brushing my teeth became difficult. All the little, I'm still kind of messy in my own ways, but there's when you come out of severe drug addiction, and suicide ideation, you're not really in touch. You're not in touch with everything that's around you. You're not in touch with your family. You're not in touch with, you could talk to them, but you're not connected to them. Because once you go into those darker places, man, it doesn't allow you to um, see things properly. And and when you have proper support and have people around you, that's what kind of was a way for me to get out of it. Right? You're the average of the five people around you. If you got one drug addict in your circle, you're a drug addict. If you got, so that was the main thing that I took out of that program, was trying to figure out, okay, and how do I get people around me that are going to help me? How do I figure that out? I don't. If you don't know the people, how do you find them? And they tell you go to these NA rooms and AA rooms, and try to figure out how to, um, tell your story, which, the meat of it's coming, but of what we're doing. But what you start realizing through these programs and through rehab and through, self-hatred and all this, you start realizing your story has way more power than you think, for good and bad. Right. And that's the interesting aspect, because I didn't want to come and launch my nonprofit and launch my organization and my story not be of something of empowerment. Right. Because it's so important for kids and people that are fighting through it, and people that are in the midst of suicide ideation, in the midst of, whatever it may be, drug wise. But it's not going to be pretty. It's not fun. It's not enjoyable. There's nothing that I can say that these last 10 years, although very rewarding and very fulfilling, and, I've been able to put this nonprofit in place, but it hasn't been I enjoy the process, but it's been tough. It's been very, very tough mentally, physically. And I think that's what people need to know. It's not going to be pretty. Don't think that tomorrow's going to be perfect. Don't think the next 2 minutes is going to be perfect. You could end up wanting to use, you might end up wanting to go down those darker paths. But if you're able to lock in those minutes and those seconds and really just learn how to get present, those are really critical things that helped me, is to take those couple seconds and put it into which what I did. Plus 3 Golf was my recovery tool, right? So that's what I used to get out of dark places. So when I came out of that program in 2014, 15, I needed something. I had to have something, right? And I accepted that. I accepted who I was. I accepted that I know that I have these tendencies and these personality, problems. And, I know I battle major depression disorder. I know I battle in social anxieties. I know I do, right? Every day I deal, right? But I can also then recognize that, accept it, and then now I can take that energy and use it for something better, right? And that's when I started to develop Plus 3 Golf, is those little seconds, right? I would do research. I'd read an article. I read a headline. It didn't matter. Something had to be done in that regard every day, no matter what. And now here we are in 2025, going into 2026, and I'm close to launching a national campaign for mental health. These those are the things that I think need to be taught, right? I think those are the parts of our stories that need to be recognized, which is going to be part of that campaign, because, and it goes into now the meat of what I feel like we're doing, is the voice is the medicine. Your story is the medicine, right? That is what helps people. AA is a perfect representation of that. For the people that program helps, it's storytelling. It's not war stories, it's storytelling. It's telling the experience of it, how it happened. um, and that's going to be the premise of Quiet Line, is storytelling. And we're going to the goal is to get 1,000 surveys. If we get more than that, fantastic, but the goal is to figure out, start navigating a curriculum. And my clinical officer, who's a trauma counselor, me and her and probably a couple other people are going to dive through these stories, Um, they can be anonymous or not anonymous. You know, we're going to do podcasts too. We got all this stuff coming as well. Um, but we really want to figure out how these stories we can find the resilience. How do we train resilience? You can't just tell someone to be resilient. It doesn't work that way. Because I'm telling you, when I was in struggle, I didn't care. It didn't matter. It wasn't real. What do you mean need to be resilient? I am resilient. You know, it's like that's the scary part though. But those are the things that I think this program, when we start looking at these stories, we're going to find very similar things that I dealt with. We can categorize those things and help specific groups of people and help specific people battling certain problems. The more information that we can gather on stories and you know, and that's how Parker, you know, Diffie got involved, is the country music. Country music is going to be a huge part of Plus3 Golf's launching. Already is, right? Because it's storytelling. Storytelling is one of the most underused medicines on in the country right now, and I'm going to change that. Our goal is to basically reshape performance culture, reshape culture. Like it to me, it doesn't make sense how we train for baseball games, we train for piano recitals, we train for um, anything. We train for everything. Who's done training for mental health? Do you? Did you do
No,
mental health training?
I have
Nobody.
not. No, no, not at all.
Not specifically, right? And so I think this is where we can come in, Mike, as an organization, and put our foot down and say, you know what, here's a solution, here's an option for us. You know, my story is direct representation of this company. It's a direct representation of the problems I've faced and solutions I've been trying to come up with in regards to how can we help people? How can we? Because what I went through was terrible. It was awful. It's like that, to be able to get yourself to the point to where you're comfortable with that thought, um, gets me, oh god. But it's not a fun place, man. It's not a good place to be. And when I started to really get into the development of this, and I realized, oh, you know, and people started coming up and telling me, oh, Brett, I was a gymnast. I wasn't able to do gymnastics anymore, and I went down the dark hole, and you know, everything's fine now. But there's story in that, there's resilience in that, but they don't know it. But that's where we can start teaching through those scenarios, right? I was a baseball player. I blew my arm out. I couldn't really continue on, so you know I had to go. You know, my baseball career is over. I'm never gonna be able to play again. What does that scenario is real? It happens all the time, but there's no support for the person exiting,
Right.
right? That's where we're gonna live. That's where we can say, as an early athlete. So if we freshman year, we bring this program, we talk about struggles, we talk about resilience, we talk about breathing techniques and how to handle life stressors and scenarios you're not planned for. And, you know, you start teaching them just very basic stuff. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. We're not going to tell them, you know, war stories,
Yeah.
but we can take those little, even like my story's in a sense extreme, right? Because I survived it. That's why it's extreme. If I didn't survive it, no one would give two shits. Sorry for the language. But that's the thing, right? Because the people that pass, the stories never get told. We're never going to know why it brought them there. All we're going to hear is everything around it. So it's important to get to the people that fought through it, right? The people that are resilient, the people that know how to get through it. And guess what? They're going to say stuff like, I had a friend. I had, you know, somebody came in and told me to shape my act up. It's not their father, it's not their brother, right? Or they're going to say, you know, I just got through it. I fought through it. I managed it. You know, I did this, X, Y, and Z. That's the curriculum. That's what we're looking for. We're looking to see how we can take those strategies, implement them early, and let it be a part of their life, right? Because now, if a freshman who's phenomenal athlete goes into college, gets hurt, but they've already been trained on resilience, they've been trained on these techniques, they've been recognized to it, they don't know the the disgusting parts of substance abuse and the tough parts, but now they are trained internally to recognize it, let alone their peers and their partners and their friends and their coaches and people around them, their family members. These kids can now have some level of training, one that's going to make them a better individual, but two, help their community, because now they're responding, reacting to, and endorsing community, right? So now that to me is the only sound solution to how to address those little problems.
No, I got you. And it's so interesting too that if you put these resources in place at the high school age level, when you get to college as a freshman, I see it with my coaching all the time. It's like you're forming a brand new identity. You're
Mm-hmm.
playing against, you're going to be
It
playing against
changes.
20, it does. And you're playing against 21, 22, 23, 24-year-old athletes. And so it's like, where does your
Good
identity go?
athletes.
You were probably one of the best, if not the best player on your high school team, to where you're going right back down to the bottom. You got to earn your way back up to the top. And there's so
It's a
many
weird
different things.
feeling.
Yeah, and there's so many things that can happen there. You get injured.
Yes.
You don't get the chance that you think you're deserving. Now you go transfer. Now you're starting over again. And it's so interesting because I fortunately didn't have to face that in college, but I saw it in front of me all the time. We'd have new players cycle in, and it's like, well, they're not going to have an impact on this team now. How are they going to have an impact? And again, the worst thing for like an athlete is just like idle time. It's like
Mm-hmm.
if you're not
Yes.
if I wasn't
Fact.
focused on like going to the gym, going to practice, going to eat my
That's
food, going,
structure.
yeah, it's like the structure. And then once
Mm-hmm.
that's done, if you don't go to school close to home, it's like, what are you going to do? And it's like you almost have like two options. Like you either got to dive into the books super hard, or it's like you're going to dive into the party culture. And if you go into the party culture, that's going to be a very slippery slope. And
Yeah. And look, some people get out of it. Some
yeah,
people do. Some people can navigate that world, but it's starting to seem like a lot of people can't, especially
well,
in the performance world.
well, and I think in this day and age too, with how accessible everything is via social media, I think mental health it becomes more and more important each day. And when you
Does.
talk about with these athletes that you're going to be working with, how do you feel it's like you're giving them a resource where like someone's actually going to listen to them and have the ability to point them in the right direction of like, hey, here's what you need to do, here are the resources at hand? How important is that to the message that you're sending?
Well, I think it's going to be a ripple effect, because I think this is what everybody wants. I think this is what everybody needs in some level, right? Whether they know it or not. The problem is trauma support. That's the stigma. Nobody wants to go get help for serious issues, serious mental health issues. I think once they see that, and I don't like my story being such a highlight in the world, but that's kind of part of this whole storytelling. Like dude, I'm in active recovery. This is not perfect, right? This isn't pretty. This is a program I'm developing in the run, but um, it's, I think once they realize that resilience can be taught and not experienced, I think that's going to be kind of the turning point. Because like we're taught as athletes to be, you know, don't talk about it, go be about it, don't tough it up, go back out there. I remember my fingers are all disformed from just wrapping injuries, not going to the doctor, just wrapping and going, which is good. I think all those things are great, but why was there not training for mental health? Right. And I think when parents start realizing that these kids aren't getting support mentally, I think it's going to open up some eyes. I think it's going to be a ripple effect. And I want to lead that ripple effect with trauma support. Because again, the number two reason between 11 and 35 of death is suicide. It doesn't, you can't fight the stats. There's a lot of people I've met that know someone that have committed suicide now, right? The it's unfortunate it's not talked about more. Um, but putting support within performance development is the way we fight stigma. Is we just make it a part of it. Stop telling people to go get help. Stop telling people to go talk to somebody. That doesn't help. Be a part of it and be involved in it. It should be all included in one beautiful package, right? You got a swing coach, you got a nutritionist, you have a strength trainer, you have a performance coach, right? A mental health coach, brain health coach, whatever we want to call it. We have somebody that is trauma based because guess what? Trauma is where things go really wrong, right? Whether it's early childhood or middle of my life, right? Middle of your life. Trauma is where a lot of those issues can really rear their head, right? And the more that we can bring in on that side of it early, and again, we're not counseling these kids for trauma, right? We're bringing in those concepts, those techniques, those ideas, right? Those ways to be resilient, right? Even though you may not know you ever have to face it, but that allows them to spread it, that allows them to be it, not talk about it, be about it, right?
Yeah.
Mentally. So that's I think it's going to have a ripple effect, Mike. I really do.
I couldn't agree more, and I think especially when not only the kids that you're going to be working with, but their parents, because I feel like parents
Yep.
like they can
Parents is
recognize.
huge.
Yeah, I feel like they can recognize when their child's not doing well, like whether that's physically, mentally, and giving them a resource that is surrounded in like the comfort of sport too. Because I feel like that's a
Yes.
key aspect where you're not like being taken off the field and brought into like a doctor's office. You're working and engaging with people that are in sport, and I
Yep.
think that's a key component to kind of taking away the stigma of like mental health and having to deal with therapists or
Ooh, you're talking to somebody.
exactly, and
It's,
I think that's the most important thing is how do you reach these people that need you the most without like coming over their head with a hammer being like, all right, you have to stop what you're doing and go and do
yep.
this. But I want to go back to what you said too, where Plus3 Golf has like been your outlet of like how you keep yourself going, right?
Yep.
And the reason I wanted to come back to this because like Elevon has been the same thing for me. It's been gosh, it's been almost 3-4 years now, and it's like COVID was a big mental test for me. I'll say, I was drinking a lot. I was doing everything to avoid like every responsibility. There was a lot of weight gain, and it was. I read the book Shoe Dog. It was by Phil Knight. He's like the founder of Nike, and so the one thing that really kind of got me out of it is like he like went through like a whole series of challenges that he went through, and I like when I got involved with Elevant, it just seemed like this would be the right thing for me because like our motto is rise and go, like chase a dream and never stop. And so it's like
Yeah,
what
it's a
is
good
my
one.
dream, what do I really want out of life, and like it came down to it's like you get one life, you got to go and chase it, you know what I mean? And it's like either you're going to be trending in
You
the
gave me
right
chills on
direction.
that one.
Yeah, and it's like it became it's I don't want to say it's become my whole identity, but without like representing this arrow every single day, it's like I like this is what keeps me on the straight and narrow. Like this is what keeps me going. And I love that Plus3 Golf is it's the same thing for you. And I think
Exact same thing.
by telling people like the meaning behind it, I think that's where you're really going to have an opportunity to make a change here. Like that's what I hope for Elevon. That's what I see you're doing right now. Is I want to be that symbol of hope. I want to be that outlet. I want you to be. I want to be your resource. I want to be someone you can come and talk to. And that's where I feel like sharing your story is so powerful here. Is because I want to give folks an outlet to tell that story. And
Yep.
it's obviously very hard for someone to share such a deep,
It's
intimate
tough, man. It's
background.
so tough because
But
it's tough
it's
too.
got to be a little
Not just
therapeutic.
because of personal reasons, but it's because we don't know how people are going to react to it. I've told my story in work environments, and it goes right against me. I go tell new people I meet, or relationships, meet a new girl. Oh, well, I have this past, dude. It affects. There's things. Those the stigma is so prevalent. It's so
Mm-hmm.
prevalent.
Well, God, I mean, I didn't even think about like other areas of life because like always so focused around sport that there's other areas where this presents challenges, just like you said.
Yes.
And so like I kind of want to go back too because you had told me earlier you're from Appleton, Wisconsin.
Yep.
You go to school at East Carolina. What was that transition like? And do you think like that's where the struggle started? Because I think we chatted about it a little bit where it's like you're
Hmm.
going to a whole new city, a whole new environment, whole new friendships. Like what was that transition? Was it difficult for you? Was it an easy transition? Kind of give me some insight there.
Well, being in second grade when we moved from Appleton, Wisconsin to Omaha, Nebraska to Charlotte, right? So that was all second grade.
Hmm.
So I got introduced to adapting and evolving at an early age. Um, I remember my friendships still to this day in Omaha, Nebraska in second grade. I still remember a couple of those people. Like that was a very tough time for me because I get taken away from my friends in second grade in Appleton. I go to Omaha for several months, and then I get taken away from those friends, and then I go to Charlotte, right, and then we're there from second grade to seventh grade, and then I we go to Wilson. So then I lose that. I think I'm not going to say that's where a lot of things started, but it that did I think have some impact on how I'm able to adapt very quickly into environments. I can go into a lot of scenarios and be comfortable. And I've learned that some scenarios I'm comfortable with, other people may not be, right? And on a broad basis, right? Like there's a lot of scenarios I'm comfortable with. And I'm not talking like bad stuff. I'm just talking, generally. But I think what happens is I lost my train of thought there, but
No,
what
we
was
were chatting about like like transitioning from from like home to school and
yes.
the challenges you face there.
So I think that was a way for me to it helped me get through a lot of things probably quicker than I should have in a manner because I was able to come out of that program, right? And again, you lose all of your contact. You lose your every time you kind of go down those roads, you lose a lot, right? So you always have to rebuild. Um, and I think this last time I was able to take all those experiences, the moving, the adjusting, the new friends, the new environments, and I just honed it in, right? I just kind of took all that energy and put it into plus 3 golf. It's like you have all these life experiences, you have all these, issues and problems, but um, when you can narrow it and be present, that's when it can be a little bit more powerful, right? That's when you can actually make impact, or personally and professionally and family, and because you really have to dive into yourself. You can't love other people until you love yourself. You can't give anybody respect till you respect yourself. You can't. It's all those basic things, right? And then it goes down to our basic need is to drink water. Well, we still need a basic needs to protect our brains, to protect our health, protect our mental health, protect our internal feelings, right? Like we're allowed to train and develop the things that we may not, quote unquote, no pun intended, think about, right? But I think those early childhood moving, constantly adapting was probably a pro and a con. But I think in the day it ended up helping me in a way that I could adapt and move into the role that I'm about to go into, and technically am in. It never feels like I'm actually what I'm doing because we're at
Yeah.
we just go. We know what that goal is, and we move. And sometimes we forget the impact we have on people around us as athletes, right? Because we do get so focused, we get so honed in. And I think what's been important for me for all those experiences is now um, respecting those scenarios, not beating myself up on them. Um, you know, I made bad decisions. Everyone does. Not everyone wants to admit it. So what's the stronger motive here? Person that's talking about it and making trying to make solutions, or the person who continues to stay in it, right? That's the basic concept, is how do we get these stories out and teach those things, right?
Yeah, well, and I feel like that's a sentiment that people understand. It's like everyone makes mistakes. Some mistakes are louder than others, and
Yep.
I think one of the things that I've really learned is like you got to let the past go. And it's like
Easier
you
said
said,
than
like
done, but it's true.
it is, but it's like you never forget the past. So use that as like a lesson to guide you for your future. And I've
Hmm.
always like found that to be super important because it's like I've made a million mistakes. Everyone has, but I think the key thing for me is like as long as you learn from your mistakes, like that's what they're there for.
Hmm.
But as we've gotten into this, I want you to give a shout out to other folks that are helping with Plus3 Golf. I was looking on your website.
Yeah,
You had mentioned
you got a
Parker.
lot of cool people.
Yeah,
A lot of
I was.
cool
I
people.
wanted to make sure that we gave them some shine as well because I know they were helping you out at Plus3 or at the Joe Diffie Classic, and
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah, I
there's.
had the crew there.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I got a lot of group, a lot of folks. We got a lot of different arms happening too, but the people that have directly um, really put Plus3 Golf on the map, the first person was Andrew Fair. Andrew Fair is a Purple Heart veteran. At the time, he was the chaplain of Tennessee for VFWs. Um, very active. He was like the number one recruiter in Tennessee for VFWs. He's just a very active. He's also a peer support specialist. So he resource specialist. So he became a entry point for Nashville for me in a very gracious way, because we met on a phone call when I still lived in North Carolina, and we related over addiction. So he was an alcoholic after his service, um, and he struggled, um, pretty pretty aggressively struggled, and he was able to come out of it and get help and support. So me and him just hit it off. He was the one that I did the first tournament with in 2019. So Andrew was part of the first five tournaments, first 4 or 5 tournaments. He was my right hand man for all of them, and we were able to basically create a platform for change. Right, people just saw him as tournaments, but he allowed me to develop Plus3 Golf through those veteran tournaments. Um, Through Andrew, I met my media co-owner of my media company, Jonathan Bowman, who owns J Bowman Creative. So he's still with me as of since 2019. And then Jason Johnson was an instrumental part of my operation. Jason Johnson's the founder of Project K9 Hero. He helps pay for the retirement of military working dogs, um, and K9, and he has a very large. They've done 320, probably 350 dogs. They've paid for support on. So he's been a very instrumental part to how I operate as a nonprofit, how I'm structuring it, how I'm kind of moving through that space. And he's kind of helping me on an advising operating portion. And then I have Chris Midget, who was one of my supporters from the social media world. He was supporting me since, I think we talked about the other day what year it was, but he's been following Plus3 Golf for several 6 7 years maybe. And we started to, when I used to go live on the course, he started jumping in those chats, and we started talking. And next thing you know, he's telling me he's a veteran. He organizes tournaments for ROTC. He wants to do one for Plus3 Golf. And I wasn't in a place at the time, and I told him, no, there's no reason to do a tournament for me right now. I'm not in a position. Then finally he approached me again a couple years ago and said, let's do it. And I said, yeah, let's go. Let's do it. So he put on that tournament, and he's put on 2 events for Plus3 Golf. And he's going to be a part of this operation, as we grow. And then, the one person that kind of really took this hold is Parker Diffie. So Parker's helping me on the entertainment side. He's kind of like my director of entertainment. So he's helping me navigate the mental health space within the music world, how we can integrate some of this into artist ownership models. And then, all of our events, we're going to have music, right? We're tying in musicians, and, we're going to teach and train them as well. Um, but he's been a huge part of getting out of that athlete mode, because all the way up till Parker, I've just been, like I said, just straight and narrow. Parker was able to kind of put some perspective behind what I was doing, and um, realize that the program we're creating can help more than just golfers, right? I knew I could help athletes in general, but he was the one that really said, this is way bigger than golf, Brett. Like this is a model that you created that can go into different areas. Like, and I always knew that I could do it in some manner, but I thought it was going to be in several certifications. I thought I was going to be making, you know, but what ended up happening is we made a one program that can correlate into all different industries and different areas, right? So Parker was a huge part of that, and then obviously being able to do that tribute concert for Joe Diffie was, I mean, that was my second legacy tournament. I did the one for Keith Whitley. Those are so special, man, because when you see the family just smiling, laughing, having a good time, it's like no matter what happens, problems, issues, when the family's happy and they're having a good time, and they're not stressing, and you can just tell that, like, those are really cool moments for me, um, because it's fun to be able to see people connect, and because that's the premise, that's what we do, that's what we're doing now, right? This is how Plus3 Golf and Quiet Line is going to work: camaraderie, storytelling. So Parker was a huge part of that. Also, there's um, um, Morgan Cyrus is one of my entertainment advisors. So he's been helping me personally as well, but he's kind of helped me introduce me into some different realms of people, to try to start networking. And so he's been a very, you know, especially in the last couple of years, navigating different fronts, I guess you can say. I want to say names, but I'm not going to say names. But he introduced me to some folks that helped me, uh, tremendous confidence boosters. Right? You start meeting idols, you start meeting people you respect, and you grew up watching. That changes. Going from hospital bed to one of your idols is a very wild experience. And Morgan's been able to help navigate entertainment, music industry, and then obviously he's been able to help help me meet some people. um Why do I feel like I'm missing somebody? I feel terrible right now. I feel like I'm missing somebody.
That's all right. We can always come back to them. But
I feel like I know. Oh god.
I was looking at the website. I should have. I should have wrote it down. But at the end of the day, the reason I asked
Debbie.
about,
Oh my god, the most key component.
oh,
Debbie Robinson.
yes,
So Debbie Robinson, she's going to be our clinical officer. Um, she hasn't been involved as much as some of these other guys, right? She's come in a little bit later, kind of around the time Parker and I met. But again, we all have full-time jobs. Everybody in this operation has a full-time job, so we're all using 5-10% of our time to try to make this thing work. But Debbie, um, I wanted to make sure that when I introduced myself into the mental health world, the reason I never talked about it professionally, or is I wanted to make sure I had the right backing. I didn't want to saturate my message, saturate my story. I didn't want to seem like I was trying to use my story, for certain purposes, right? This has been a very slow, steady, constant thing. And when Debbie came in, it was very obvious that she was going to be the one that I needed to partner with. She is a trauma counselor, and the main thing that just absolutely sunk in is she does trauma support for Mount Juliet High School team, football team. So she was already doing the stuff I wanted to do, on a practical sense, on a real time scenario. And so we started talking. I told her my story. She told me, she's got, I'd rather her tell her story, but, you know, there's stuff in her story that related to mine, So it's like, holy cow, here we go. Here's another person that's just lining up. And she's going to be instrumental to this development because, again, she's the backbone to this nonprofit working. If I'm in a mental health space, me alone can't navigate that because the moment I start trying to push something, they're going to ask who my clinical, who's professionally supporting you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just a high school graduate right now. I never graduated college. I got 4 years of college and nothing to show for it. And so I still needed that professional backing, that professional support, and she's going to help kind of bring it to the ground. And really, once we get things moving and get some funding in place and stuff, she's going to really provide people with some really good avenues for kids. And when we gather all these stories and we start developing this curriculum, I think that she's going to be able to really help shift some culture change. I think that having someone that's already doing, again, I've never heard of it, right? I've never known people to introduce trauma into athletics, right? I've never heard of it. And here's a person that I randomly meet through Parker. And, again, this is all just happens naturally, man. It's all organic. I never searched for any of these people. I didn't ask for any of these people to be a part of my organization, Mike. This is people that found the cause, they found the mission, they related to it. There was something, a part of it that they understood and they wanted to, continue doing it. That's what's so special about it. Now we have our clinical officer, and I can't announce my next person, but I did just bring on a business manager and future COO of the company, who is going to be. I can't wait to talk about him. That's going to be. He's big time in his own right. Young 27-year-old doctor, athlete, superior athlete, and I can confidently say that.
Well, we'll have to do a follow-up podcast once it's official because now I gotta know. Now I gotta know.
I'll tell you off camera.
Okay, off the record. Off the record. Yeah, that's fine.
I don't want this to go out too soon, and because once we get a couple of things we're putting in place, he's going to help bring me business structure and operation so that we can be set up properly for grants and funding, and he's going to really try to hone me in. We're going to leave me as visionary, leave me as the guy that's moving.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I think that's the key thing that I was, hoping to get out of, asking the question about who's supporting you is like, that's the team that's, bringing your dream to life. And I think that's something that's
personally and professionally.
Yeah.
Personally and professionally. This is the concept. This is the concept in motion. Having teams around athletes, having teams around schools, having people around. Like, I am living proof of what I'm, trying to explain in some manner. But yeah. Yes.
I absolutely love it. And it's always so funny because I always ask guests, I'm like, what is your Rise&Go story? I feel like this entire conversation has been a great encompassing story behind, what makes you do what you do every single day. I don't think there's any question in that. And I think that's so powerful. I don't want to hate on like my previous podcast guests, but for some of them it's family. Some of them it's, I want to be an entrepreneur, but when it comes to like mental health, that's a very powerful thing. And, hearing your story, that's what Rise&Go is all about. It's like, it doesn't matter what rock bottom is for you. That's exactly what it is. Now we're going up. Now we're getting up every day. We're putting one foot in front of the other.
No matter how bad things are getting.
Right. And I think some days for me, it's like, some days I'm operating at 5%. It's funny. Like today, I got to sleep in. I got to go to the gym, had my Rice Krispie treat, had my energy drink, and I felt like I could move mountains today.
And then there's me who rolls out of bed. Hey, what time is it?
Yeah, I was like, what the hell, man? I thought we had this. But that's the thing is like you don't have to be at 100% every day to make progress. It's like I always preach this like when I'm doing my gym content. It's like I want to be 1% better every single day. And if you add that up over time, it's like you'd be amazed at the strides that you
It's
can make.
monumental.
Yeah, yeah, I'm telling you, and like that's the beautiful thing. So one of the last things that I wanted to ask you was, so what would you say to anyone out there that is struggling with their mental health and is looking for resources? Like, what would you say to
Don't don't be afraid of who you are. Don't be scared of the thoughts. Don't be scared of what's happening internally. Um, if you can start realizing that all of those feelings and dark thoughts that you're having, everything you're going through, you're allowed to observe it. You don't have to live it. Um, that's there's no other good message for, especially for what I've dealt with. Don't believe what yourself is telling yourself. Okay, plain and simple. Don't believe it, um, and don't believe it to the extent of you think you're crazy of not believing it. Right? Stop believing it. Now, if you're not in that moment, resource. If you're wanting to get support, you want to get resources. Um, don't be afraid to reach out to a nonprofit. Type in nonprofit, mental health nonprofit. Boom. That is probably a better avenue than reaching out to a therapist. Um, Nonprofits are really good bridges for mental health because those are the folks that probably have gone through it more, right? And so they can kind of give you some good guidance. Kind of a premise of what we're doing is to be the bridge between the struggle and professional care. Um, but end of the day, just get in front of people, get in front of somebody, and tell them. Just tell them. Tell somebody. If it's that bad to the point of life, tell somebody immediately. No matter how dumb you think you're going to feel, it doesn't matter at that point. It's much better to be dumb than dead.
Ain't that the truth, brother? I absolutely love that. I've absolutely loved this conversation. I know, man. I appreciate you putting your heart on your sleeve here. I know
Yep.
it's probably not easy, but I feel as though
I've
that's.
gotten better. I've gotten better with it.
But I mean,
I didn't.
even if this podcast helps one person, like that's the whole purpose of this entire thing. Is I want to help that person that wants to lose weight. I want to help that person that's dealing with mental health. I want to help like that single mother get back to who she felt like she was. I mean,
Yeah,
I know it's like
it
everything
doesn't
like
have to be extremes.
it
It does
doesn't,
not have to be extremes.
and that's where it's like I've heard many times where people are like you need to like niche in something. I'm like I really don't want to because I really do feel like Rise&Go is for everybody. But no, thank you so much for joining our podcast here. For everyone out there, again, go through the socials and where they can find Plus3 Golf.
Yeah. So again, Mike, thank you for inviting me onto this. I'm in a transition of trying to push our message. I really appreciate you. This has been a year of my voice, right? Voice is medicine, right? So this has been my year of trying to really get outside myself. So I really thank you letting me coming on and being my own chaotic self. So socials, plus 3 golf, plus3golf .org. We have the website is done. We're still tweaking and adding things and fine tuning. We want to be ready for funding and ready for transparency and things like that. But plus3golf.org took me 3 years to make that site with my developer, so we're excited to have it live and ready and operating. And then our socials are TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, all at plus 3golf. And then be on the lookout next year for the YouTube, where we'll be me and two other long drive guys, and we're going to be talking mental health, playing with people, podcasting, having a good time, trying to kind of destigmatize this mental health
Yeah,
realm
out of
that we're in.
curiosity, like when you're like traveling around, like are you going to like different tournaments outside, like Nashville, Tennessee? Like, are you where
Not
are you
right now.
traveling? Not right now. Okay.
Right? Not right now.
I mean,
As
God
a
forbid.
not, I played. So you got to remember, I played a little professional too. So
Yep.
I was able through all that. I was able to play some professional and competitive. But in regards to organizing, we do plan on expanding. Our next stop is going to be Colorado. So hopefully, end of 26 into 27, we'll have events in Colorado, and then Washington State will be next, and then Washington will be probably mid 27 into 28. And then we'll have scattered events through in there. But we're trying to create our core events across the country.
Sure.
We're
No,
just in the
that's actually good to
early
know.
stages.
I'll tell you what, I don't hate Nashville. I it's funny because when I was 18, I lived in Murfreesboro. That was like my first
Oh, okay.
experience away from home. And well, I shouldn't say first experience, but like I went to junior college in Iowa, which is like an hour and a half away from where I live, so it's not that bad. But like when I moved to Tennessee at 18, like I fell in love with Nashville, so I will come back to Nashville.
It's been good to me.
Yeah, and again, any of those events that I can help pitch, I can help promote, send those my way. But yeah, we'll definitely keep following along. We'll stay connected here, and thank you again for sharing your story.